Thank you, Mr. Ramonica. Thanks very much to ANDAF and to Iafei for this invitation. In still the uncertainty if Mr. Chambia is going to arrive or not, I might or may not represent the very last hurdle between you and lunch, so I will try to be not too challenging a hurdle and possibly a short one. The topic I'm supposed to speak is cross-border investment. I would like just to briefly read this topic in the twist of the short-term versus long-term capital investment debate. You do represent issuers, you know how important is long-term investment. Frankly, when I look at the collector of capital in this country, the issue of long-term capital raising is particularly acute and scarce. This applies almost to all sectors. When you look, for instance, at the banking sector, that is increasingly or even more relevant in a sense that many investments that the bank is supposed to do, especially those ones that often are required a lot by newspapers and so on, take the very important issue of SME lending. That is a very big long-term investment by definition, and if you don't have the proper type of understanding and support from your investor, then it becomes quite difficult to work on. Now, interesting enough, as we know, also on the investor side, there's an increasing important rhetoric on the importance of long-term investment. I think we all read with interest the fact that back in last May, a very prominent, possibly the most prominent investment figure like Larry Fink has been writing down and sending to many of the top global blue chip companies a letter asking for more attention to long-term investment, which is quite interesting coming from that side. By the way, it simply reflects the fact that nowadays, if you look at the investors' world, a big part of that, in reality, is indexed passive investing that cannot take the typical short-term approaches. So long-term investment is important. Everybody agrees on it. The fact is that there is so little around. Why and what can we do about it? And what is the perspective of Italy from this standpoint? The perspective of Italy is that in this country is even scarcer than in the rest of the world. Pension funds do represent a very little account of the overall investment. Given the more fragmented nature of the overall corporate world, the number of entrepreneurs who can make long-term investment with a large amount is very, very small. So the issue of attracting long-term capital is particularly crucial for the development of the economy, especially of this country. What can we do about it? What is being done about it? From this standpoint, I think it's important to highlight that Italy, that up to 20 years ago, was very, very clearly in all world geographic maps a clear laggard when it comes to corporate governance, has done a lot of steps in this period. It's a pity that that Raffaele is not with us anymore, because frankly the stock exchange had its own share of merit in improving the overall corporate governance approach and practice of the country, together with what regulators, government and so on have been doing. I'm always talking in relative terms. The point I want to make is that the governance of companies in this country is today much better than what it was approximately 10-15 years ago. Now, within this frame, Italy has also introduced, or has been introducing, some new aspects of governance that do represent, in relative terms, an element of innovation, or has some historic aspect of governance that in the worldwide context do represent something different. I make an example. A very, very old institution like the Collegio Sindacale, Board of Statutory Auditors, is something that is present in a few countries. Italy is one. I'm particularly knowledgeable of the banking sector, and I can tell you that the board of statutory auditors is quite precious in a bank, cannot be substituted by an audit committee, and is something that if I were in other lawmaker, in other countries' lawmaker, I would consider to watch what is the functioning of board of statutory auditors, for instance, within the banking industry, because it could be quite useful to strengthen the risk management of a bank. Second, this country has introduced a few years ago, in order to improve diversity, the so-called pink quotas when it comes to board. Again, it's something that is not applied in many countries. If you are a listed company, you must have 30% of board members being female. And I think it has been very, very important and positive. It is giving a hand to increase overall the diversity in the management, in the top constituencies of the corporate world of a country. Generally speaking, it has been helping to improve the overall quality and diversity of the board. Last aspect of innovation one can mention is the fact that the country introduced 18 months ago the so-called tenure voting. Tenure voting is a way to try and reward long-term investors by saying that if you hold for over 2 years shares in a company, you're going to vote, your vote is going to count double. This without having the chance to apply the vote in the context, for instance, of anti-takeover measures. So it's a relatively healthy measure. It has been highly debated. Having said this, frankly, it is still, one can say, an experimental period. No more, I think that there's still a handful of the issuers that have adopted it for the moment. However, it can be quite interesting to see if that will help at all the creation of more long-term capital, because effectively, if you are a long-term investor and if you want to commit to try and follow the overall corporate practice of a company, it takes a big investment. It's a cost. I think in one way or the other, you should be rewarded. Now, I mentioned these three aspects as aspect of differentiation and innovation of the Italian corporate governance practice as something that can help to further raise and attract long-term investment. I'm far from saying that Italy is the best country of all. Quite on the opposite, there is still a lot that needs to be done in order to further improve overall corporate governance practice. Let me make some example. Frankly, if we look very objectively at the delta between what should be an ideal and required composition of boards in terms of competence mix and what we actually have, frankly, there's still quite a lot of way to go. Another example, if you look at the blue chips, most blue chips do have nowadays are public companies. Most of the capital is in the hands of the market. However, the market does not represent or does not vote more than 1, maximum 2 board members out of 15, 20. That should change. And last, the preparation of shareholders meeting is something on which management should put much more time and effort to explain exactly the reason behind certain choices, to try and get the proper consensus versus the major decision that the AGM is supposed to take. So quite a long way to go. Having said this, it's always good to look at the glass half full and half empty. It's clearly more full than what it was some time ago. Still, it's a job on which the corporate Italy has to put, I think, a lot of investment because, as I said before, long-term capital is crucial for the growth of the country, for the growth of the economy, and long-term capital in this country, unfortunately, is scarce. Thanks very much for your attention.